They don't lose you first. They lose the version of themselves that felt safe around you. And that is why your leaving lands differently than any argument ever did. Because arguments still keep a connection alive, even if it is messy, even if it is painful, even if it is exhausting. It still says, I'm here, I'm invested, I'm fighting for us. And an avoidant can tolerate that kind of chaos because chaos feels familiar. Chaos still gives them a role where they can retreat, return, explain, distract, and reset the balance without having to truly change. But your departure, the calm kind, the final kind, the kind where you don't slam doors, and you don't threaten, and you don't write 10 paragraphs trying to be understood, that kind of leaving creates a silence they cannot manage. Because it removes the version of them that was comfortable being half present. You have to understand what you gave them. Because you keep thinking you were just loving them. But what you were actually giving them was emotional shelter. You were giving them a place where they could show up underwhelming, inconsistent, distracted, and still be received with patience. You were giving them a relationship where they didn't have to be fully brave, because you carried the courage for both of you. You carried the conversations, you carried the repairs, you carried the reassurance, you carried the benefit of the doubt. And in a strange way, that made them feel safe, not because they were committing, but because you were. They felt safe in your loyalty, safe in your predictability, safe in the fact that even when they pulled back, you were still there, still trying, still explaining your heart like it was a homework assignment you had to submit perfectly to earn love. And that is why they don't lose you first. They lose the version of themselves that could hide behind your love. The version of themselves that could pretend their distance wasn't damaging, because you kept patching the cracks. The version of themselves that could say, I'm just busy, and watch you swallow disappointment with a smile. The version of themselves that could go quiet and still trust you would return with warmth. The version of themselves that could delay accountability and still keep access to you. That version of them, the one that relied on your emotional flexibility, the one that benefited from your softness, that version collapses the moment you leave, because suddenly there is no cushion, there is no translator, there is no bridge, there is no one left to make their avoidance look like something harmless. And the most haunting part for them is not simply that you are gone. It is that they remember how they felt when you were there, and they realize they didn't know how rare that was. Because you didn't just offer love, you offered steadiness. You offered a calm nervous system in a world that feels threatening to them. You offered warmth without humiliation. You offered care without trying to control them. You offered understanding without forcing them to explain every emotion. You made space feel gentle, not like abandonment. You gave them room to breathe, while still being present. And they might not have celebrated that while it was happening, because avoidant hearts often confuse peace with boredom, and consistency with pressure, and real intimacy with risk. But once you leave, they feel the difference between peaceful love and empty freedom, and that difference can be brutal. Because when you are gone, the noise returns. The distraction stops working the same. The scrolling, the working late, the I'm fine routine, it all starts to feel thinner. And then memories come, not just the romantic memories, but the simple ones. The way you looked at them when they spoke. The way you noticed them. The way you made them feel like they mattered without demanding they perform. That is when they understand that you were not just a person in their life. You were a place they could rest, and now they have to sit alone with themselves. And for someone who built their whole identity around not needing anyone, that is a terrifying mirror. And here is where it gets even deeper. When you leave, you also take away the version of them that felt good enough around you. Because even if they acted distant, even if they acted above it, even if they tried to appear unaffected, There was a part of them that softened in your presence. There was a part of them that started believing, maybe I can be loved without being perfect. Maybe I don't have to keep running. Maybe I can let someone close and survive it. You were slowly teaching their nervous system something new, not with lectures, but with repetition, with patience, with safety. And when you leave, that progress doesn't just pause, it feels like it disappears, and they panic, because they realize, I had something rare, I had a person who saw me, and I still chose distance. So they don't lose you first, they lose that softer self, the self that laughed a little easier, the self that trusted a little more, the self that didn't have to stay guarded every second. And now, without you, they have to rebuild their armor. They have to convince themselves again that they are better off alone, because admitting the truth would hurt too much. Admitting the truth would mean admitting they missed out on a love that was trying to meet them with kindness, and they responded with avoidance. And that realization creates a particular kind of grief, the kind of grief that is not just heartbreak, it is self-disappointment. And if you are the one who left, you need to hear this in a way that reaches your chest. You were not too much. You were not too emotional. You were not too needy. You were asking for the basics of love, clarity, consistency, presence, effort. You were asking to feel chosen without having to chase. You were asking to feel safe without having to pretend you didn't care. And when someone makes you feel like those needs are problems, it is not because your needs are wrong. It is because they do not want to face what love requires of them. Love requires showing up. Love requires honesty. Love requires courage. And an avoidant will often delay courage until the consequences arrive. That is why leaving changes them, not always in the way you hope, not always with a clean apology and a sudden transformation. But it changes them because it removes their favorite comfort, your loyalty. It removes the proof they used to tell themselves they weren't causing damage. It removes the person who made their effort feel like enough. And in the quiet after you leave, they are left with the truth. You didn't just walk away from them. You walked away from the version of them that was built on you staying no matter what. And once that version dies, they are forced to confront who they really are without your love cushioning the impact. And that confrontation is exactly why they are never the same. Your absence removes their control, and that's when the feelings they avoided finally catch up. Because control was never just about power. It was about protection. An avoidant doesn't always control with demands. They control with delay, with silence, with distance, with vagueness. With the ability to decide when the connection starts and when it stops. They control by keeping the relationship slightly out of reach, just enough that you stay emotionally alert, just enough that you keep trying, just enough that you keep hoping. And when you are the one who is always reaching, always explaining, always checking the temperature of the relationship, they never have to sit in the discomfort of their own emotions. They can stay in their head, they can stay in their routine. They can stay in their safe place where love is optional and vulnerability is postponed. But when you leave, something shifts that they cannot negotiate with charm or excuses. When you leave, you take away their ability to regulate the relationship through withdrawal. You take away the button they used to press to feel safe, the button that said, I can always step back and they will still be there. And that is why your absence does what your tears could never do. Your absence removes the stage where they could perform detachment. Your absence removes the comfort of you waiting. Your absence removes the idea that love is something they can access only when they feel ready. And in that sudden loss of control, feelings rush in like a flood, because feelings were never gone, they were simply avoided. At first, they may look fine. They may even act relieved. They may tell themselves, this is better, this is peaceful, I can breathe again. And for a moment, it might feel true. Because avoidant patterns often feel calm in the beginning of separation. The nervous system that was triggered by closeness feels relief. The pressure that wasn't necessarily coming from you, but from their own fear of intimacy, seems to lift. They tell themselves the story they always tell: I'm good alone. I don't need anyone. I'm not built for this. Relationships are complicated. But then the reality starts to unfold, because calm is not the same as healing, and relief is not the same as freedom. Relief is just the absence of intimacy, and the absence of intimacy eventually turns into emptiness. And that emptiness is where the feelings catch up, not as a romantic movie scene, but as a slow haunting. It comes when they reach for their phone out of habit and realize there is no message from you. It comes when something good happens and they instinctively want to tell you, and then they remember they don't have that right anymore. It comes when they have a bad day and there is no soft place to land. No one who knows the details of their life, no one who remembers their patterns and loves them anyway. It comes in those moments where they realize you weren't just relationship. You were emotional infrastructure. You were the person who made their world feel less sharp. And now the world feels sharp again, and they don't know how to admit that they miss you without admitting they needed you. Because here's the truth: the biggest fear in an avoidant is not love. It is needing love. It is the humiliation, in their mind, of wanting someone. It is the terror of dependence. It is the fear that if they let you matter, you will have the power to hurt them, the power to disappoint them, the power to leave. And the irony is, they spend so much energy trying to prevent abandonment that they create it. They keep control so they don't feel exposed. They keep distance so they don't feel needy. They keep you guessing so they don't have to confess. But when you leave, the very thing they feared, the loss, arrives anyway. And now they have no control over it. And that is when the emotional debt comes due. Your absence forces them to feel what they kept postponing. It forces them to sit with questions they avoided. Why did I pull away when I cared? Why did I make them work so hard? Why did I treat love like it was a threat? Why did I keep testing their loyalty instead of valuing it? And they may not say these questions out loud. They may not text you an honest apology. They may even get defensive if someone brings you up. But inside, these questions circle them, because control kept those questions quiet, and your absence makes them loud. And what makes it even more intense is that you didn't just leave. You took your energy with you. You took the warmth, the attention, the availability, the forgiveness, the repeated chances. You took the emotional labor that was covering the relationship's weak spots. And now they have to feel the full weight of what they didn't carry. They have to experience the consequences of being the kind of person who only shows up when it's comfortable. They have to face the loneliness that comes from keeping people at a distance. And loneliness hits harder for avoidants, because they are used to telling themselves they prefer it. So when loneliness hurts, it threatens their whole identity. They start remembering moments they dismissed. They start replaying your expressions, the times you tried to talk, and they changed the subject. The times you asked for reassurance, and they offered logic instead. The times you were brave enough to be honest, and they punished honesty with silence. They remember the exact points where you were still there, still trying, and they realize you didn't leave suddenly, you left slowly, you left in pieces. You left every time you felt unseen. You left every time you swallowed your feelings to keep the peace. You left every time you had to lower your standards just to keep the connection. And when you finally left completely, it wasn't impulsive. It was the final page of a story they kept refusing to read. This is why your absence is so powerful, because it teaches them that love is not something they can control through withdrawal. It teaches them that if you keep stepping back from a person who is trying to meet you, one day they stop stepping forward. It teaches them that people do not leave because they stop loving. They leave because loving starts to cost them their dignity. And that lesson lands deep, because it's not a lesson you delivered with words. It's a lesson delivered by reality. And if you are the one who left, I want you to understand something that will help you stay strong. Their pain is not proof you made a mistake. Their pain is proof they are finally feeling. Your absence is not cruelty, it is clarity. You didn't leave to punish them. You left because you were tired of being punished by uncertainty. You left because you couldn't keep living in the emotional, waiting room of someone else's readiness. You left because you wanted a love that doesn't require you to disappear to be valued. And the moment you stop being available on demand, the moment you stop responding to crumbs like they are a meal, the moment you stop proving your loyalty, that's the moment their control breaks, and their feelings finally catch up, and they realize, the person I thought would always stay, chose themselves, and I don't know how to live with that. An avoidant changes when space stops being an option and becomes a consequence, because for so long, space was the escape hatch that made everything feel survivable. Space was the pause button they pressed whenever closeness asked them to be real. Space was how they managed emotions they didn't want to name. Space was how they avoided accountability without having to openly reject you. Space was how they kept the connection on their terms, not through cruelty, but through distance. And distance can look polite, while it quietly breaks your heart. And maybe you tried to respect it, because you're not someone who wants to control another person. You wanted to love them in a way that felt safe. So you gave them room. You gave them time. You gave them understanding. You told yourself that patience was mature, that calm was powerful. That if you just didn't pressure them, they would eventually choose you freely. But what happens when someone is used to getting endless space is that they stop treating it like a gift, and they start treating it like a guarantee. They start believing you will always be there when they return. They start believing you will always translate their silence into, they're stressed. They start believing that love is elastic, that it can be stretched, and stretched, and stretched, and still not snap. And when you finally leave, when you finally stop being the person who makes waiting feel noble, that is when space changes its meaning. It stops being an option they request, and it becomes a consequence they didn't expect. It becomes the price of their hesitation. It becomes the result of their inconsistency. It becomes the silence that doesn't lead back to you. And that shift is what shakes them, because an avoidant is often most comfortable in the middle. Not fully in, not fully out. Not committed, not gone. Close enough to receive love. Distant enough to avoid vulnerability. That middle is where they can breathe, because it keeps them in control. In the middle, they don't have to risk rejection, because they never fully step forward. In the middle, they don't have to risk responsibility, because they never fully claim you. In the middle, they can tell themselves, I could have made it work if I wanted to, which protects their ego from the truth that they were afraid. And you staying in that middle with them, even unintentionally, keeps the illusion alive, but you leaving ends the illusion. It takes the relationship out of the middle and turns it into a fact. You are either present or you are not. You are either choosing this or you are not. And they can hate that reality, they can resist it, they can try to distract themselves from it, but they cannot negotiate with it, because consequences do not debate. Consequences don't beg. Consequences don't chase. Consequences don't offer one more chance after the 1,000th disappointment. Consequences are quiet, firm, and final. And that is exactly why it changes them. Because they are no longer dealing with your words, they are dealing with your boundary. At first, they may try the old pattern. They may test the door. They may send a casual message that carries no responsibility, something light, something indirect, something that gives them a way to re-enter without admitting they left. They may check your social media. They may ask mutual friends about you. They may hover around the edges of your life, hoping you will open the door for them, so they don't have to knock. Because to an avoidant, knocking is vulnerability. Knocking means risk. Knocking means admitting they want you. And they will often try to avoid that by creating situations where you chase them back into connection. But if you hold your ground, if you stay calm, if you stay consistent with your decision, they begin to realize the old tools don't work anymore. And that's when something deep starts to happen. Because the avoidant nervous system is not just losing you, it is losing its strategy. It is losing the method it used to control emotional intensity. For them, space was the regulator. It was how they soothed themselves. It was how they calmed the fear that closeness brings. And now, 'cause you're gone, space doesn't soothe them. It scares them. The same distance that once felt like relief now feels like loss. The same silence that once felt like freedom now feels like emptiness. And the mind does something painful in emptiness. It replays, it reconsiders, it remembers. It brings back the moments they minimized. It brings back your kindness. It brings back the times you tried to talk. It brings back your patience. And it asks them a question they hate. Why wasn't that enough for me to show up? This is where the consequence becomes a teacher. It teaches them that relationships are not built on being comfortable. They are built on being consistent. It teaches them that love cannot survive indefinitely on potential. It teaches them that you cannot keep asking someone to wait while you figure out whether you want them, and then expect them to still be there when you finally decide. It teaches them that a person's loyalty is not infinite, and a person's heart is not a waiting room. And those lessons hurt, not because you wanted to hurt them, but because truth hurts when someone has been avoiding it. And if you ever wonder why this consequence is more powerful than any conversation you had, it's because conversations allow loopholes. Conversations allow promises. Conversations allow tears and apologies, and "I'll do better." And sometimes those words are sincere, but an avoidant can use sincerity as a substitute for change. They can mean it in the moment, and then disappear again when the moment demands consistency. Consequences remove the loophole. Consequences turn "I'll do better" into "you should have." Consequences turn "I'm not ready" into "you're not chosen." Consequences force the adult reality: either you grow or you lose what you had. And if you are the one who left, you need to hear this with your whole chest. Your boundary is not cruelty. Your boundary is clarity. You did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started caring about your life. You left because you realized that love should not feel like standing outside a closed door, hoping it opens. You left because you were tired of calling inconsistency timing. You left because you could not keep sacrificing your emotional health to protect someone else from discomfort. And when you made space a consequence, you finally showed them what space truly costs. Because space was never neutral. Space always had a price. You were just the one paying it. You paid with anxiety. You paid with self-doubt. You paid with nights overthinking. You paid with swallowing your needs so you wouldn't seem too much. You paid with the constant effort of being understanding. And now, for the first time, they pay. Not with punishment, but with reality. And reality, when it finally arrives, is what changes them, because they are forced to face the one thing they tried to avoid all along. The truth that love requires courage. And if you don't act with courage, you lose love. Not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly, through the consequence of someone choosing themselves.